All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really unique and honestly pretty controversial guide to cheating from a relationship coach. We're going to be digging into a very specific worldview about loyalty, gender, and what it all means for relationships.
I mean, this has to be one of the most painful questions anyone can ask in a relationship, right? The signs, they can be so subtle. The answers are almost never simple. And wow, the advice you get can be all over the map depending on who you talk to.
So that's what we're doing here today. And just to be super clear, we're not endorsing this viewpoint at all. We're just explaining it. We're going to walk you through a framework from one particular source that has a very specific and for a lot of people, a really unusual take on the whole nature of men and women. So you've got to ask, where is this all coming from? What's the foundation for this coach's advice? Well, the author is actually really upfront about it right from the start. Okay, so the author, who goes by Coach De Bruyns, basically says his expertise comes from his own life. He's in a polygynous marriage, and he says he's been on both sides of the coin. He's pursued other women, and he's been cheated on. So he claims that gives him this, unique insight into the whole thing. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to start with the signs that the author says apply to men. He lays out some pretty specific behavioral shifts to look out for. So according to him, for a husband, you're looking at 5 main signs. Things like a complete drop-off in sex, a big change in how much time he spends with you, suddenly having new close female friends, starting to find fault with everything you do, and then boom, out of nowhere, he wants a divorce.
And this part about female friends is, wow, it's really something. His stance is incredibly definitive. He basically argues that platonic friendships between men and women, nope, not possible. He says there's always a low-key sexual undertone, and get this, that every female friend is a potential lover. No exceptions.
Okay, so now let's flip the script and look at his perspective on a cheating wife. And right away, you'll notice he gives a different and, a noticeably longer list of signs. When it comes to women, he seems to focus a lot more on what he calls personality traits and emotional states. So things like narcissism or being really hot and cold, super loving one minute and distant the next. He also mentions making threats, marketing herself with provocative pictures online, having close male friends, refusing sex, and then just suddenly wanting to break up. And check this out, because it really gets to the heart of his whole philosophy. You have the exact same sign, no sex, but he explains it in 2 totally different ways based on gender. For a husband, he says it's because his libido is a biological drive, and if he's not getting it from you, he's getting it somewhere else. But for a wife, he claims it's because she's monogamous by nature and just can't handle being intimate with 2 men at once. The way he interprets threats is also just worlds apart. He says if a woman threatens to cheat, it's not some kind of warning or a cry for help. No, he argues it's actually a sign she wants you to leave, so she can feel less guilty about what she's already doing. For him, at that point, the marriage is over, period. Okay, so this brings us to the really crucial question. What happens next? Once you find out, what are you supposed to do? And this is where the advice from this coach just splits dramatically depending on who cheated. So first up, let's look at what he says to do if your husband cheated. Can the marriage be saved? Well, according to him, yes, it can, but there's a big if. He basically argues that you can stay with him if he kept up with all his duties to you and the family. It's like he separates the act of sleeping with other women from what he considers actual loyalty. And this all goes back to his core belief that it's just in a man's nature to want more than one partner. All right, so what about if a wife cheats? What's the advice then? Is there any chance of reconciliation in that situation? And the answer here is a hard, absolute no. He claims that for a woman to cheat, it's completely unnatural. He actually frames it as a sign that she is deeply disturbed and broken. He says a woman like that is just incapable of being loyal. So, in his view, trying to fix things is impossible. So, as you can probably see by now, all of this advice, the signs, the reasons behind them, what you're supposed to do, it all comes from one single core idea about men and women having these essential, very different natures. Yeah, this table really lays it all out pretty clearly. For men, cheating is framed as this natural, biological thing, and you can work through it. But for women, it's seen as this unnatural act that means they're psychologically broken and there's just no coming back from it. So the real takeaway from all this, the guidance isn't really about the cheating itself.
It's all the product of this very rigid belief system, one that says men and women have these fixed, unchangeable natures, especially when it comes to loyalty and sex.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought here. Going through a perspective like this isn't about agreeing with it. It's about understanding that these ideas are out there. It just goes to show how profoundly different people's worldviews can be. And it kind of forces you to think about all the different ways people define really big things like trust, nature, and commitment for themselves.